You know, it's really a great pleasure to get to work with a wide variety of creative folks, and every once in a while you get some projects in that are just on a whole nother level. As I think most of you have seen from this last one, Andrzej gave me a concept that we went with for the shredder, and then furthermore with the series monotypes that was a really interesting kind of a very well thought out, well articulated idea, and it was our idea to kind of tackle that together and work through the process together. I'm not going to talk about it right now. I'm going to let Andrzej have his words first, but I just wanted to thank you for coming, and I'm going to hand over the seat to Andrzej here. So.
Hi, so I'm Andrzej Zielinski. I'm not going to do a full background thing, but I'm originally from Kansas City. I grew up north of the river, Hartsville area, and basically lived between Kansas City and Lawrence, Kansas, until about 1999. So I went to Art Institute in Chicago, and then from there I moved to New Haven, Connecticut, and got my master's in painting and printmaking from Yale University. Then after that, I went to Rome, Italy. I lived there for a while. So I ran out of money. So I'm going to basically talk about the shredder concept in my work. There's a book over here, and I have painted and sculpted other technological devices. I can go into all the whys and hows, but I'm going to focus on this talk on just the shredders and how the different mediums have led me to different explorations and end results. When I was at Yale, I was painting laptops and ATMs. And the laptops that got me some attention at Yale were leading to shows after graduation, including Greater New York PS1, at MoMA, and a solo show in Los Angeles. And part of the attraction around this time, which was about 2001, was the screen and how this was a portal. Lots of people were thinking about these things. And laptops actually weren't that old, they were rather new, and getting to the point where they're getting smaller, and not just corporations were buying them. They were affordable for some people to afford to buy them, start using on a daily basis. And while I was doing that, you know, I had professors asking me, well, how do you expand that? You know, you can't paint laptops forever. You know, paint figures, and do still lifes, but apparently you can't paint laptops. And so I just thought, you know, a screen was the thing that kind of leading these together. Why not make a bigger painting and just make an ATM? And so the ATM has a screen, and that is a bigger machine, and that kind of dumbly and smartly gave me the rule for the next object. In terms of my sizes with objects, they're like a 1-to-1. So I don't usually make anything like a laptop computer that's 6 feet by 6 feet. That kind of plows Oldenburg territory, where it's monstrous and goofy and that kind of thing. My stuff is already wonky enough, in my opinion, but I like it to have some kind of familiarity. So there is a 1-to-1 relationship. So when I graduated from Yale, I was working on those two bodies of work, basically. That's what I've shown. And of course, I wanted to expand further. When I got to Rome, I had shipped my paint by mail from America to hopefully show up. They weren't showing up. And so basically started drawing. In drawing, I felt a little bit like laptops and ATMs were kind of familiar. Wanted to expand a little bit. What to draw on paper? What about the material paper? So I started thinking, what machines use paper? And the paper shredder being obviously, you know, a candidate for that. From there, I started doing, thinking about how I could do it, and I bought some older drawings from that time in Rome. Here. And this is a very, very early one, in fact, like in the first couple of them. And what I'll kind of, you can see how it's kind of squashed up. So I actually like balled this up like you're going to throw it away. You kind of see all the wrinkles and everything. That was intentional, but I didn't do it on the outside, so I kind of squashed it up. In thinking about the materiality, because in my computers and ATMs, part of the attraction or what I was interested was in the interface, people interfacing with my artwork. Artwork in the past has been kind of an interface. but when I moved to Rome, that really sank in. You know, it's a very tactile city. A lot of the floral carved reliefs on things are based off of real plants. They're a little bit abstracted, but not to the point you can't tell what they are. So my paintings had buttons in places you wouldn't normally think, so I played with those kind of things, but there was a sense that people would want to touch them. So in this, wasn't a lot of buttons on an ATM, but there's the bag and the shredded paper. Now obviously this doesn't have any shredded paper. You know, it's just a bag, and it's empty. And then I started thinking from there about the actual shredding. And doing more of a shaped kind of, element. At this point, I hadn't really thought much of folding the paper or folding it in back on each other, but this started the whole shredder kind of idea of using the materiality to expand on and limit myself as what my solution would be. From there, I went into paintings, which I have by the door here. And this one from this period, this is around 2009. This was shown in New York, with a similar body work. But this one most explains the idea the best. I actually made this panel with the idea that I was going to pour paint into it. That paint actually came out of these holes. And at the bottom, I actually cut this piece out and put paint in here, acrylic paint with a lot of aluminum, and press down on it like Play-Doh, how it kind of does different things and constrict it. So here, I was trying to, instead of shredding paper or something else, how would I shred paint? Without painting paint in a traditional sense, shred it, not a realistic way. So I used a paint that was watery to kind of come through and itself drip, because the drip being implied as shredded parts. So all this kind of frames it for me in that kind of sense. The panel itself is being like concave in, things aren't really certain, but there's a certain kind of degradation of the machine or coming to life. I'm not really sure what's going on here. And that's part of the idea, to not have it totally resolved in the sense that it's locked into place as not necessarily a shredder. But when you read the word shredder in the title, your brain starts to have to figure things out and maybe think, wow, this might be the paper slit, this might be paint, or this might be the machine, but the machine separates from bottom to top. Why is the paint going over this connection? So shredding, in a sense, is a way to confuse data. Like you shred something so you can't read it or somebody else can't read it. It's a security measure. And it was used by our government up to the 1980s as only government agencies were allowed to really buy it. And around the 1980s, it became put in civilian production. And the modern shredder was invented based off a pasta machine, which makes sense, by a German. He's not the one that invented the paper shredder, and that goes back further, but Adolf Ettinger was a guy that basically sold a pasta machine, came up with a way to shred it, because he had anti-Nazi propaganda at his house, and he needed to get rid of it. Because he was German in pre-World War II times, and they were going around arresting anybody that wasn't part of the Nazi Party. So he ended up kind of patenting that, and the government started learning that this is a way we can really destroy materials. So here, the shredder itself is kind of it's held together by the thing that is destroying the documentation. So the paint itself is the kind of tie between the top and the bottom. More recently, fast forwarding to this year, in the last couple of years, I call it expanding into sculpture. I don't know if sculptors like that term, but I've kind of gotten more three-dimensional in terms of things. My paintings, as you can see, have some relief on them. And with this piece, which is steel and it's powder-coated, using that kind of closed cycle of my original materials that's limiting me to what I will use, paint, paper, drawing material, kind of in a traditional classical sense. I'm not using anything super new. Here, I start off with steel, and the actual original steel is this color. You can actually see when I buy it, it's got the markings on it still on there. This is 1/8 by 1 inch, so it's 1/8 thick and 1 inch wide. They're about 7 feet long, I believe. And all those are here, so they're different widths that I bought. Not all of them are 1 inch, some are half inch, some are 3/4. And I left that there to show the original, how many I've welded together. And in this part, I ground all those welds down and created the paper. So this was all welded together to about right here in this level. From there, they're twisted, heat up and twisted, and it's not. And 2 of them, or 3 in this case, end up making the leg for it to stand on. Other ones kind of go through, and they all go through to end up making what originally was the original steel, and still has some of the original writing from the factory worker still on it. So that's why this part has the scale, the mill scale, which comes on steel on it, and this one is kind of got a heat patina. While I'm heating these up, that heat spreads and that patina is on there. So that might look familiar to ballooning or stuff like that other steel produces. So this is really new, and this idea of shredding kind of goes into the material. So if I'm working in steel or wood, those things definitely influence how the outcome will be and where I kind of close that loop and limit myself to where I'm going to go with it. In my other shredders, I'll use more than one material. I'll use marble, which takes a lot longer in terms of like carving and that kind of thing. And then I'll fit different elements to that where they're more than one material. So that isn't always the case, but while I was working on this, I was also working on the print. And the two kind of crossed over to give me these ideas, and that's why I'm giving this talk basically, focusing on the shredder. So I had done shredder drawings, and I had done one other shredder print, but while I was working on this idea, Aaron invited me to come in and we talked about doing a shredder where I was just going to use one big sheet of paper and that would be the shredder. I fold it in, do something, and that was kind of all I did. I had to come in and figure it out. So I came in for about 45 minutes by myself on that table over there with some newsprint. Eventually I got to a point of something I was happy with. It was basically folded in cut paper, one piece, and I showed it to Aaron, and it was literally no drawing, no color, nothing on it. And he's like, okay, let's get this to a really nice piece of paper, and then you can show me what the shredder looks like. Aaron couldn't see what I was going for at that point, but he could see like that I had definitely folded for the paper. And he wants, before he gets to his end of the printmaker, trying to undo and figure out how you would copy that, he needed to see that more of a closer to the end result. And at this time, I was also working on some steel things, including this, and I was considering adding other elements, but this idea of sustainability and other things kind of is something I'm interested in general, that those ideas were kind of coming into my head, and this idea of the Earl Burroughs idea of the snake eating its tail, the typical sign is like the perfect thing that has no waves, and kind of renews itself over a period of time, it's a cycle, a closed cycle. And I thought, how perfect for a paper shredder. Shredders can be used as a way to help speed up recycling in paper, obviously. Turn the paper pulp, if it's shredded already, it's faster to put it in the paper pulp and recycle. But it led me to use the idea of everything, and I mean everything, including like the registration pin, is what I wanted, that we used had to be in the print. And Aaron's like, okay. But he didn't get it. I was like, no, I mean, even the registration pins. He's like, what?
It's physically impossible, by the way. Almost. Literally almost physically impossible.
But at this point, I was set in my idea. Because I had just finished this, and I was very happy with it. And I was like, I got into this print. Because why it's hard to explain a lot of this is that while I'm doing this, different solutions present themselves as an artist. And what makes them mine is the solution I end up choosing after some consideration to lead it away from the stuff I've done before, to lead it away from other artists that have done something similar, and that weighs in my decision making. But also with this, it just seemed perfectly, like I said earlier, some people will say, with the laptop, just make one big painting of a laptop. Like, that sounds stupid to me. But going big with something similar, like an ATM, is a bigger machine, that makes perfect sense to me. I'll do a big painting, but I'm going to do it up a little. ATM, not of a laptop. And so that logic gives me the ground zero to start from. And that's probably the hardest thing for an artist is to get going. One artist that's really small, kind of played with that idea is Cy Swanley. He literally took a piece of chalk, stood on one side of the canvas, walked across, got to the other side of the canvas, turned around, walked back, and was done. That is the initial, and that's the problem of our artists. Where do you start? That's the big thing. And in printmaking, there's extra pressure because they're going to make more, so it's got to be good. So if you come in as an artist, there's a certain kind of other level because you're also working with somebody else. It's a collaboration. I don't really work well with others because I'm kind of, I want to do what I want to do, but I don't know what I'm doing. I kind of do, I got it, no, I don't got it, and then I go from this, and then the rest of the day I'll be working on marble or painting, so I'm jumping around. I work on a lot of things at one time, so 15 or more different sculptures. And that kind of working on different things would be crazy for some other people, but for me, the different solutions present themselves at different intervals on different sculptures or drawings. And so my color sensibility from paintings and printmaking is definitely influencing my choices in materials and powder coatings and that kind of thing. So that said, part of what's new with this print is it's the first time I've actually incorporated any writing on any of my work ever that I'm aware of in any cognitive way. And I thought, part of the printmaking process is, and this was done printed on different plates, which are up there, is destroying the matrix. That is, what you printed from is the matrix. That's the master key, as you think of it, that you're going to make multiples from. And at some point, when it's done, you destroy those, so nobody else can make that. It's like money. You make the kind of block print. Once that block is money printed, destroy that so nobody else can make more money out of that kind of thing. Well, I thought, how can I incorporate that idea in the print? And so basically, I ended up using Aaron's writing that he used to kind of figure out how to make the prints with the different colors. He had to each plate has a different color, and they have to be printed all separately, each color. So he's got them all marked out for his own reference, his own system, which color is which, where this goes, back, front. So this print's printed on both back and front. The sides are folded over, and from the back to the front, vice versa. And so that kind of closed system really came home to me when I put in the writing. And that really is the end cycle that begins the new printmaking process. So in a sense that the work of art is the edition itself, that body of work that Eric's printed. It's also my own work, the singular actual image and the folding of paper is my own kind of cycle. So we both have that coming together. I feel like I've talked a lot in that. So does anybody have any questions? I don't really ask about anything, including the drawings or paintings or work in general.
Do the colors mean anything to you?
Well,
Special significance?
I'm a very intuitive color person. I like bright. I don't particularly like wearing them, but I like kind of funky colors.
Sure.
I've always gravitated to that, and I think that comes from in the 80s. And all the way up until I was about 20, I was in skateboarding very heavily before it was hugely mainstream, and they had a lot of these colors. And I didn't realize that recently, so I saw some of my old skateboards, and that kind of surfer culture. But I really think I associate that with on some level, it's a happy time. I see pictures of myself with O'Neill shirts that are bright fluorescent orange, in swim trunks that are really loud colors. But I also like that certain insects and amphibians and everything, that especially that are poisonous have these colors. And part of I did begin my first laptops in this very muted gray office kind of color. That is very indicative. The palette I used, if you know art, was indicative of an artist named Luke Toyman. And the name came up, so I thought I need to change this. So I really went out there, thinking how they were already getting weird, but how far can I push the color? And I found that was a stronger part of my individual artistic thing. And to Larry's credit, he never taught me too much of color theory. He told me what color theory was, but didn't wipe my head, brainwash me into like thinking like I have to use these colors and keep it a certain kind of way. But Larry taught me to see the grays in different colors, so that even though there might be a certain, we see them differently, like an orange and a green. Basically, if you were to take all that away and just make them grayscale, they could be virtually identical.
Wow.
And so different artists play with that, but that became something I was particularly interested in. And also, after Rome, making things that were both physical and illusionary, which is Italy's big claim to fame is perspective and stealing the Greeks' ideas of sculpture, pretty much. So, yeah, there is in one way or another. I definitely need certain contrasts to happen, but I don't realize how different my colors are until I go around and see what's going on in galleries or whatever. I realize that.
One other question. Will you do more, not this, but in the same medium?
Well, I'll do more print. Sure.
More folding somewhere.
More than likely, I don't limit myself to
Just
one.
ask.
Yeah. It's a possible. It could be presented as a possible solution. But if I do something else, like say I'm doing scanners now, which is new for me. So the idea of how something would be scanned, the bright light, all that's kind of in my head right now. So I'm experimenting in painting and drawing, with sculpture, like how I can convey a sense of that without literally making a scanner.
Right.
Give the feeling and some ideas for people to say, like, and kids really get it. I had a show in Sydney, and I had what was a big wooden piece of eucalyptus tree, and it looked like it was concrete, but I covered part of it with a concrete pumice, and the bottom was sandstone, and I thought it was very obvious that it was a computer. But this girl that I reckon was about 7 was saying, looking at it, and her parents like, "What do you think it is? A mailbox or whatever?" And she looked at it and she goes, "It's a computer." You're right. Here's the button. So there's this weird kind of, thing that children can really intuitively pick up on, even if I'm abstract with this. They can really see this stuff because they're just surrounded by it all the time. And I feel like I'm of the generation that had like Oregon Trail, Apple computers out in the hallway because you couldn't fit the whole thing through the door of the classroom. And like only press this button very slowly, and don't break anything. And then slowly seeing that permeate into my life, more and more. So, yeah, and like I said, I've done more of these particular ones with metal, but I'll change things up. I'll use a plasma cutter to actually chop up some of this so I have really rough edges that speak to shredding in a different way. I'll have some that are looser, like they look like they're actually more activated because some of these strands are out more. Kind of, you can think of a traditional model of an atom where you see like the electrons and everything flying around. And I'm very interested in science. I'm kind of like a topical, I'm interested in all the things, so I read like Science magazine and all that kind of stuff. And all that filters into ideas. So if I can read different things like that in my work and kind of, push myself to say, I can't believe I made that, not in like a pretentious way, but I push myself into new territory, like I'm kind of chuckling or weird, that's different. That's the exciting thing that keeps me going, as an artist. So, you can ask Aaron, I'm not short of ideas.
Not even remotely.
So, if you have questions about the actual print, this particular print, Aaron can fill you in. He's got a folded version over there and an unfolded version.
Sure.
And